Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this event at MaRS. My name is Peter Deitz. I'm managing editor of SocialFinance.ca, which is a program housed here at MaRS within the Social Innovation Generation department. We have a very action-packed, slide-free presentation for you tonight, this afternoon. So my opening remarks will be brief. We do have 9 speakers who are going to each address a best or worst practice of social finance, and then hand it off to the following speaker. I should say that speaking of the best and worst practices of social finance in 2011 is a bit like the Wright brothers talking about the best and worst practices of flying machines in the early 20th century. This is a new field. The folks who are going to be presenting to you, the folks in this room, are all quite knowledgeable on the field of social finance, and we will collectively, and others who aren't able to speak today, be forming and influencing the development of social finance in Canada. It's a very exciting event. I'd like to thank MaRS, Social Innovation Generation, the Ontario Network of Excellence, and Social Venture Partners Toronto for helping us with this event today. I'm going to hand it over now to Dan Tisch, who's co-chair of SVP Toronto.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. It's really exciting for Social Venture Partners Toronto to co-host this event today, and I really share Peter's and echo Peter's sense of discovery and enthusiasm for what we're going to hear today, and just what's incredible things are happening in the field of social finance. For those who don't know, Social Venture Partners Toronto, we're a group of venture philanthropists. We were founded in Toronto in late 2007, and our concept is investing together our money, our volunteer time, and our consulting talent in worthy nonprofits that help to reduce or eliminate poverty in Toronto. And you'll hear more from my colleague Joanne Corvin, who's going to be presenting on our behalf. But for us, our focus is really investment and education. And so it's very exciting today to invest a little bit of our time, our collective time, in educating ourselves about the incredibly interesting field of social finance, not just for social return, but also for economic return for society. So I won't dwell on introductions anymore because we have a lot of speakers to get through, and so it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Beth Coates, Financial Manager at the Canadian Alternative Investment Cooperative, and I think all the other speakers are simply going to come up and introduce themselves. So over to you, Beth, for what we know will be a really interesting 5 minutes. Thanks,
Dan. Okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to live up to that. If I'm going to have sort of one overall idea on the best practices, it's that social, and so just here's my mantra, social finance is social. It's not done in a vacuum, it's not done by yourself, it's not the capitalistic model, it's social. And I think everything else kind of flows from that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some best things that CAIC's seen through the years. And CAIC, the organization I work for, the Canadian Alternative Investment Cooperative, has been doing this for over 26 years. So we're not quite at the Wright brothers, we're a little past. Or maybe we were doing the air balloon thing and we're up to the Wright brothers, I don't know. So anyway, first of all the best practices CAIC feels comes out of this idea of social. The best projects are ones that have broad community support. They have boards of directors, founders, etc., who have really strong skills, and they're able to make connections within the community. So those are kind of the 3 pillars, if you will. And then, so the best practices then that comes out of that. Now, CAIC is a lender. Although we are set up to do sort of investing in shares, that kind of thing, the fact is we really have been doing mortgage lending and other types of lending. So the first good thing then that people manage to take those 3 assets is that if they borrow from CAIC, all of our loans are open. And so if they borrow from CAIC, they turn around and take that debt as a cause for the organization. So they start doing fundraisers around the debt. They do buy a brick, they do dinners, they do you name it. And especially we have found in some projects, especially within some ethnic communities, debt's a bad word. And they can really convince their donors that this is a very, very worthwhile use of their money. So that's one excellent process. And what's really interesting is CAIC rarely sees, we usually set up about a 15-year amortization for our loans. Rarely do loans go that far because the groups have been able to rally around the debt, get it off their balance sheet, and away they go. The other good thing when you have a really sort of strong community around you is that for many nonprofits and charities, government is a portion of their income. And government priorities change, as we all know. And so if you have a broad support, if you lose government support because priorities change, governments change, we all know that, you can sort of rejig your organization and make it through the tough times. And that's because the community's behind you. So you may have to do some more fundraising. You may have to go get some more donations, but you're able to sort of, you know, it's like having both feet on the ground. You're not just standing on one leg that gets pulled out from underneath you. So that's the other best practice. And CAIC, increasingly so over time, has looked for, when we're looking at the top line, at the revenue line, if you will, for social projects, we look to see that their revenue's coming from lots of different sources. That's probably one of the first key things that we look at. The second really good practice is around, if an organization wants to go out and get an investment in, it should be a time of reflection and regrouping for that organization. For a lot of groups, either they're starting up or they're charitable, and their focus is often 1 year. Their focus is often 6 months. Their focus actually sometimes is just next week. If you're going to go out and borrow money on a long-term basis, you have to start thinking long-term as well. Those 1-year plans should become 5-year plans, because you're going out and borrowing money for 5 years' time. It's a chance for the organization to say, holy doodle, not only are we getting debt here, mainly we're getting an asset. What are we going to do with this asset? Does this asset possibly have some other income generating capacity in addition to what it is that we're taking the asset on for? For example, if you're buying a building, is there some extra space in the building? Could we rent that out and generate some more income? And then, gee, we're going to start building equity in this building. Well, what are we going to do with that equity? Are we going to turn around and lever it out in 5 years' time? So the best projects are the ones that say, wow, this is a game changer for us. We're going up to the next level. We better rejig our organization so that it starts sort of seeing itself as an asset holding organization with some longer term 30 seconds, and I never got to the bad stuff. Okay. Well, the bad stuff has to do when borrowers don't realize that they live in the same world that everybody else does from a business perspective. And that's probably the worst. So they come to CAIC and they have unrealistic expectations about how much they can borrow, and they don't understand why. The other bad thing that that happens with CAIC as well is that they aren't diligent and businesslike enough in their operations. So the pieces of the organization that don't work, they refuse to sort of deal with that, and unfortunately, what ends up happening is the whole organization suffers, and that's it, folks. Okay.
So my name's Anshula Chowdhury. I work at Social Asset Measurements. And to start off my talk about best practices in social finance, I want to start with a quote from Adam Smith. Adam Smith actually said, "No society can be flourishing and happy when its members are poor and miserable." He goes on to talk about how to lift ourselves out of poverty, we need to trust in the invisible hand and the ability of markets. If we fast forward 300 years, we have another quote. Poverty is the most serious threat to world peace and sustainability. And the person who said this was Muhammad Yunus. And again, his solution for poverty was to trust in markets and to hope that economic activity would be able to end poverty for our generation. When I look at these two quotes, I think there's not that much difference in them. There's this trust that markets can actually solve these issues for us. And yet I would also argue that there's a difference between social finance as we see it now and the rest of the financial markets that we operate in. So when we try and actually differentiate between social finance and the rest of the world, we get into a quagmire of definitions. There's no clear way forward between differentiating between what's actually social and what's purely profitable in a financial sense. And so it should come to no surprise that I think that the only way to make these definitions operational, to create action on them, is to start implementing metrics that have specific social goals. And so I wanted to start with an example on this in terms of using metrics in a way that have helped social enterprises create success, both financially and socially. So in 2010, Social Asset Measurements worked on the social finance chain in partnership with the Young Social Entrepreneurs of Canada. We provided a $1,000 loan to Preparing the Trail, a youth-driven social enterprise. It was a 4-month loan period. It wasn't very long, but during that 4-month loan period, we're able to, Preparing the Trail was able to plant 650 trees over 4 months, and they're able to make 3 times the loan principal that was given to them. In addition, their social return on investment for that period, which was calculated by Social Asset Measurements, was for every dollar that we donated in terms of the loan, they were able to provide $8 of social value. So with 3 times the loan in terms of financials and then $8 of social value, we have about $11 of social and financial value for every dollar that we'd given to them, which is great. And I think that there's probably a lot of other organizations out there that do things like this, that have that kind of impact. But the difference between Preparing the Trail and, for example, Pathways to Education is that these organizations are actively starting to measure their impact. And because they're able to do that, Preparing the Trail was able to gain about $30,000 of funding during that loan period that we didn't provide them with. They're able to provide a clear idea of where their social value had been created. And more than that, they were also able to realize that they weren't actually sustainable. They looked at where they're spending their resources and realized that in a year from now, all the staff would be burnt out because they weren't actually making any kind of financial profit for themselves. So they're able to make these strategic decisions about where to put their funding and where to put their energy. And in doing that, I think that is what separates the social finance sphere from just the purely financial. They were able to really decide on what their social value was going to be and make that core to their mission because they're able to actually quantify it. So what I would leave you with in this is that, again, what separates us from just the purely financial is the self-consciousness of who we are and the social value that we can create. But we can get lost in that. We can choose to only go for the financial profit if we don't start measuring what we're doing and if we don't start communicating that more clearly. We can't trust in Adam Smith's invisible hand. It just simply does not work. And the only way to avoid that is, again, to measure clearly. I think if we can accept this and if we can start measuring more precisely the work that we're doing, that is the best practice I would leave you with. And it starts from day one at your social enterprise, and it continues from that day forward. It's a consistent practice that has to always be done. It's not an option. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hazen, and I'm the Director of Stakeholder Engagement at the Center for Social Innovation, CSI. I'm going to spend a couple sentences explaining what CSI is, and then I will speak very briefly about describing what the CSI community bond is, because it is a little exotic, and then I will then go into the best practices. So the Center for Social Innovation essentially has a mission to catalyze and support social innovation in Toronto and throughout the world. What is social innovation? Social innovation is solutions to current or existing problems. So we think of these innovative solutions. And the way that we support that and catalyze that often is by doing it ourselves in our dirty little sandbox. It becomes a success, and then in supporting it, we help replicate it. We're very open source. So how is a CSI community bond an innovation and a solution? We came to a place where we wanted to get a lot of capital investment for a goal and a growth that we wanted as a social mission organization. So the existing problem is, how does a social mission organization raise a lot of capital revenue to kickstart a concept? That's not granting, that's not through programs, and possibly not going to get a loan from a bank. What the CSI Community Bond allowed us to do was create an investment package that we would offer to the very broad community, our constituents and our supporters, to then believe in what we're doing and invest. It is being done. However, it is innovative for us as a nonprofit in the nonprofit sector to do a bond, and especially to do it with an RSP eligible investment at the $10,000 level, which is truly community. You could have a private school that has an RSP eligible investment because according to the Income Tax Act and with the Government of Canada, mortgages are RSP eligible. And that's a fascinating concept I'm happy to talk about another time. But having said that, an established institution that's been around for 50 years or so could have an RSP eligible investment, and there are some out there, but the investments typically start at $25,000. So we're a nonprofit, we're very community-pieced about that. We set up our CSI Community Bond for a $2 million offer to purchase a $4.8 million building and the leasehold improvements on top of that. So we're looking at a $6.4 million project, and we raised $2 million to pay that capital initial investment to the bank to buy that building. To do that, we brought together Scott Hughes and Brian Eiler and Tanya Sermon, who's our executive director, fearless and resourceful, all of them. And they created the package and the legal documents to create this offer. What I want to say that's the best takeaway behind this is that, like every investment opportunity that you can offer out there, it needs to have a sound business model and a sound business case. So whatever your growth concept is, it needs to make money. You need to know how, you need to know why, you need to know how much money you want to project to be making and feel really solid about that. Then you also want to look very carefully at the why and the risk management. There's a reason why we have a $2 million limit to our bond offer, which, by the way, we're sold out at by now. It's very successful. It's because that's how far we wanted to go out into the water, and knowing that we could still swim back to shore if the world went to hell in a handbasket and we weren't thriving. We knew that we would be able to pay back our investors. But most importantly, it's about the why and engaging our investors, because there's lots of investment opportunities out there. We're not an established venture opportunity. We're 6 years old, and we're very creative, and we're really nice people. But when you look at it as a business opportunity, yes, we've managed our risk. Yes, we can talk about our business case and our business model and how we plan to earn revenue to pay back the principal, as well as the interest, as well as thrive and make money. But it was really the why behind why people were ready to invest in us. And we did that kind of stakeholder engagement in a number of ways, but very, very good communication materials, excellent transparency. We held a series of information sessions that were very personal, a lot of stewardship and engagement with the people that came to those information sessions to say, I'm glad that you came last night, do you have more questions, and really making it a personal relationship. Another key piece that we did is we had 3 offers on the bond. We had an A bond, a B bond, and a C bond. The first 2 bonds are more expensive. People entered in at a much larger level. And then that opened the doors for the C bond, the $10,000 level, because then I could go to TD, RBC, CIBC, Scotiabank, and BMO, and establish those relationships with those people to get them to accept every day your neighbor down the street who has a $10,000 RSP portfolio kicking off to invest, because institutions would look at a $10,000 investment with our bond as something that would be a little bit more risky. So being a benevolent society is an important issue as well, which I'm happy to talk about in future discussions. But that would probably summarize the best practices that I could establish at that point. So thank you, Peter, for your warnings and your time.
So my name is Ann Jameson. I run the Toronto Enterprise Fund, but I also am known as Annie Investor, which Tanya Sermon dubbed me because I was one of the first average investors to commit to buying a community bond. and which I'm very pleased about. Anyway, the Toronto Enterprise Fund is we call ourselves an impact investment fund. We're looking to use our funding to reduce homelessness in Toronto by investing in social enterprises that create employment for people who are marginalized. We're at the riskiest end of the investment spectrum. I quite often call ourselves 100% risk capital because we give grants. So in some ways, we're a traditional grant maker. And we also invest in startups. Unlike CAIC, we see that as one of the best places to put our money because we have we're looking for innovative ways of creating employment for the target population that we serve. We also make long-term commitments to the social enterprises that we fund. We've been funding one social enterprise on an annual basis for more than 10 years, although for most of them we've only been funding for, we've been funding for over 5 years. In terms of I'm not sure I would call them best practices, but for us it's been really imperative that we're very clear that our expectations of our social enterprises are that they improve their business performance year over year, and as a result of that they improve their social outcomes year over year, because there's a direct link between the two. And we strongly encourage our social enterprises to continually reduce their reliance on grant funding and to increase their reliance on their sales revenue and to become more businesslike and profitable with time. And at the very least, we expect enterprises that by year 3 of our investment in them to be generating enough revenue to cover all their business costs, and then we would continue perhaps to subsidize their social costs. So I want to talk to you about one of the sort of another best practice that I've encountered in my time at the Toronto Enterprise Fund, which is don't give up when the going gets rough. I'm sure a lot of people believe in that. I'll give you a case study of one investment we made. It started in 2004. The Furniture Bank, which is a charity that gives donated furniture to people who are moving out of shelters into independent accommodation. Where one of the winners of the very first iteration of our annual business plan competition, and they won the seed funding award to establish Furniture Link, which is a furniture delivery business, or was a furniture delivery business employing primarily shelter residents and people who were receiving disability support. Our investment is approximately $70,000 per annum. The first few years were pretty rocky for Furniture Link. It struggled to find a market, and it struggled with human resources, which of course are two of the biggest struggles that all of our social enterprises face. And they were also distracted by issues at their parent organization. At one point, it looked like the entire organization was going to close its doors, and that would mean the end of Furniture Link. So despite this very bleak outlook, the Toronto Enterprise Fund continued to fund Furniture Bank, or Furniture Link, and we kept it on what we call a close watch basis. So we were looking at their how they were doing on a monthly basis, and because of that funding, we were able to really help them to get to a point in 2007 when they encountered a turnaround, and the turnaround has been spectacular. Their board agreed to start charging for picking up furniture from the people who were donating the furniture to them. And at the same time, the City of Toronto introduced the Streets to Homes program, which is moving people off the street into independent accommodation, and came to an arrangement with Furniture Link to deliver furniture for those people. So the combination of these two new business streams, if you like, helped Furniture Link to turn around. And today, they're our most successful social enterprise. They're generating close to $1 million in revenue, and they employ almost 30 people. And are planning to employ more in the next year. Half of those people are full-time, which in our sector is pretty unusual. Most of the folks that are employed who have very high barriers to employment tend to work part-time, so it's a pretty unusual social return. And it makes a small profit, which is the only one in our portfolio that even comes close to making a profit, and it's one of the very few in Canada of this model that makes a profit. So I think had we not persevered back in the around 2005, 2006, that might not have been the success that it is today. It wasn't just us who persevered. Obviously, their board and their staff and their other supporters persevered. And I think don't run away when things get tough. It's always worth sticking to it. You still have to protect your investment. It's slightly different if you're a lender rather than a grant maker. But that is for me is a really true best practice. one of our worst, I wouldn't call it a worst practice, but one of our biggest failures was a small program that we started also back in 2004, where we made strategic investments to our existing, oh my God, to our existing social enterprises. I'm not going to finish in 45 seconds, by the way.
We don't have a contingency.
Oh no. So we made small. We introduced a strategic investment program for existing social enterprises, and the design of that program was to provide up to $50,000 to an enterprise to invest in either expertise, industry expertise, or capital. Now, the capital side was very successful, no problems there, but investing in industry expertise proved to be a failure. Our expectation was that there would be a return, that the expertise, the investment would be used to bring the enterprise to the next level, and that over a 3-year period, the increase in their profitability would be equivalent to the original investment. And that never happened with our investments in industry expertise. And one very short case study is in one case, a manufacturer hired a production expert to provide advice on how to better produce the product that they were producing. This expert had decades of experience and had run his own business in this sector, but he could not get his head around the social. So to Beth's point about social finance is social, he came into this organization and he recommended that they A, lay off all their staff, that they B, hire people who already had experience in the business, and that they C, move their production to high-end manufacturing, which of course requires higher expertise, which of course was the exact opposite of what this social enterprise was established to do. So I think my lesson learned there is that if we do want industry experts to help us in the development of our social enterprises, we really need to educate them around the social aspect of the work that we're doing. And they have to learn to embed that in their thought processes. Over to Alex.
Thank you. Let's see this. I saw this automatically move, so I didn't know if you were able to like raise it or something, but this should be okay. My name is Alex Corvin, and I run the Access Community Capital Fund. We are a micro-loan organization providing small amounts of capital to individuals who want to start businesses in Toronto. Now, I was actually specifically asked to talk about worst practices only. I don't know what that says, but you know, when Anshula gave her quote from Adam Smith, I kind of a quote popped up in my head. In fact, it was no Adam Smith. I think it came from an episode of The Apprentice or something. But it was something like, knowledge is learning from the mistakes of others, while experience is learning from your own. So here we are, I've experienced, or we've experienced, and now you can know. And that's kind of the context of how I'll tell our story, or I guess all the details of how we learned. You know, in kind of the business of running a microfinance program, where majority of our clients are already vulnerable, people from vulnerable populations or coming from vulnerable situations, worst practice, according to our definitions, is being, you know, directly responsible for putting someone in a worse off situation than they would have been had they not come to us in the first place. And that's done either through sort of careless lending decisions or even just ignorance and not knowing the impact that we may have. Now, having said that, we define worse off sort of in 3 ways. You know, we can make someone worse off by 1, giving them money, giving them credit when they're clearly not able to take on additional debt. So when their loan defaults, not only is at a black mark on their credit score and an already poor credit score, but then it subsequently significantly limits their ability to access financing in the future. The second one is, when we fund a business, we are, you know, indirectly kind of validating or endorsing the feasibility of this venture. And the entrepreneur will take that kind of confirmation and invest their own funds into the endeavor as well. So if we carelessly, you know, fund an ill-fated business, and it fails, that entrepreneur is then in a worse off financial situation from an economic standpoint than how we just said right from the beginning, this is a bad idea. Maybe entrepreneurship is not your thing, which we've had to say, you know, sometimes we're not in the business of coaxing anyone's ego. So we have to be kind of quite pragmatic in our lending decisions. The The third one is, giving a loan to someone who isn't able to pay it off causes a significant amount of sort of personal or qualitative damage. And what I mean by that is when someone defaults on a loan or their business fails, the impact to their self-confidence, their relationships, family, especially if family members are also investors in the business, can be significant. And this is especially true because we have clients that may have, a history of mental illness or addiction, and a blow like that could really kind of send them in the wrong direction or in a downward spiral even. Now, as practitioners of social finance, it would be irresponsible for us not to recognize that this damage to the person's credit, their financial situation, their family is actually more important. This, what we call, I guess, the social damage is more important than the financial loss that we would face by not recovering this loan. But if we really want to be innovators in social finance, then, we're behooved to find ways to mitigate this risk. Now, microfinance will never be perfect, but this is where I have to tell kind of a case study where I've significantly, obviously, altered the facts to protect the privacy of our clients and volunteers. But so I'll kind of describe one of our learning processes. Now, for those of you who may know, Access started off as being 100% volunteer run in one community, in the Riverdale community of Toronto. And having said that, it was fueled by so much passion and good intention. The volunteers who formed Access really wanted to help members of their local community start their own businesses. And the concept of just knowing your neighbor alone was enough to base a lending decision on. That was fine. But as we grew and expanded to larger parts of the city, if someone took a loan from us and defaulted, we would quite literally be at a loss of options on how to re-engage them or get a hold of them. They could just sever all contact, and we've had very little recourse. And having said that, so we had a client who borrowed money, say, to buy camera equipment for a wedding contract that they had at the end of wedding season in October. And they got their money, and the wedding subsequently was canceled, an act of God, however you want to describe it. So as a result, they missed their first, second, and third loan installments. Now, when this volunteer, the loan officer who was responsible for this applicant, finally got a hold of the individual, she was so desperate to salvage the loan and prevent it from going into default that all she could suggest to the client was that she sell her assets that she had purchased, the camera equipment, to catch up on the installments. Now, even though that the camera equipment would be sold at a loss, and then the client would then be left with no assets to earn income to pay off the remainder of the loan. Now, this is our definition of worst off. So instead, right, we should have told the client to pay whatever they're able to, just to keep them engaged, whatever minimal amounts of payments they can muster up, maybe assign them a mentor to be able to help them with marketing until wedding season picked up again, and then re-engage them when business came through. So what we learned from a situation like this, or situations, I just alluded to the fact that there's more than one, but is number one, attracting and training qualified volunteers is key, especially when we as an organization really depend on the expertise and the community that our volunteers provide. And regardless of, how well-intentioned these volunteers are, they have the ability to significantly influence outcomes for better or worse. So now we have mandatory training on processes. We have written documentation on evaluation guidelines and best practices, and all new loan officers are now asked to shadow a more senior officer before they kind of get into the game. Second of all, in the absence of certainty on whether a business can be successful, we have to do our part in preparing the client and our organization for the possibility of failure. So now we've incorporated in our evaluation process key questions on assessing the individual's contingency plan or exit strategy. And that being said, we can't hold you accountable to the universe being unpredictable, but we can hold you accountable to doing what you said you'd do when you looked us in the eye before we gave you a loan and you said, if things don't go according to plan and you're late on your loan payments, you will get a part-time job or sell your shoe collection if that must be. We can hold you accountable to that. So that's sort of the processes that we've implemented. And finally, micro-lending, especially in the context of social finance, when our real goal is trying to improve people's livelihoods, not make profit off the interest, that type of micro-lending will never be perfect and will never be efficient. So recognizing that, you know, we have to accept that there will always be risk, but it's our job, like I said, to try and mitigate them. And if we try too hard to make it perfect, we will actually end up screening out the very people we're trying to help. And so those are kind of our 3 lessons, but I'll leave off by saying to all those who are kind of engaging in social finance or have followed even maybe the microfinance movement in the news recently, that the road to hell can be paved with good intentions, and like the way Access started off, it was just a lot of really well-intentioned individuals. But as you know, expand and kind of the market grows, that is not going to be enough. And when you're in the business of affecting people's livelihoods, it's just as important to think of all the ways that things can go wrong as it is to celebrate the ways that you're doing right. So that's it. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joanne Corvin, a co-founding partner of Social Venture Partners Toronto, and just recently completed my term as chair of the investment committee. As my colleague Dan Tisch introduced earlier, Social Venture Partners is a venture philanthropy model of social finance. So our partners, individuals who come from all walks of life, different professions like lawyers, accountants, from the not-for-profit sector, from the public sector, we pool our funds and our time and skills and invest these with not-for-profits to help build their organizational capacity. We don't invest in programs and services. We, as I said, invest in their organizational capacity to build it or strengthen it. These areas include, of course, organizational strategy, financial management, risk management, HR, and so on. We currently have 3 investees. We started in 2008 with our investments, and we currently fund Eva's Phoenix Print Shop, Microskills, and Skills for Change. And we're now in process of selecting up to 2 more investees. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, I'd like to talk about our experience with our first investee, Eva's Phoenix Print Shop, which of course many of you might be familiar with, a commercial enterprise print shop that's run out of Eva's Phoenix, which is a youth shelter for homeless youth. And they've connected over 100, they've trained and connected over 100 youth with jobs in the graphic communications sector. SVP has invested $75,000 over 3 years with Eva's Phoenix Print Shop. But our real impact has been how our partners have engaged, worked with the staff in partnership. And some of the ways that we've worked with them so far is upgrading their sales contact management software and their job estimating software, so they're able to turn around quotes to potential customers a lot faster and compete with other print shops. They've refined the roles and responsibilities of the print shop for more efficient workflow, and strengthened how they market the youth training program to potential employers so more youth are getting jobs. And right now we're updating, a couple of the partners are working on updating the curriculum so that the youth are getting cutting edge skill training so they're more competitive or as competitive as possible in the workplace. So as you can tell then, the ways that we have volunteered are bringing in our business skills to an organization that's in the not-for-profit sector in ways that, and the feedback that they've given us is they hadn't maybe thought of that, and it's a different way, as well as just a value add. It's a limited number of staff, and we're able to kind of shore up and help them sustain. And the key is too, it's teaching them to fish. We're not doing the fishing for them. So we're not out there marketing the training program. We're showing them and advising them. The impact of our investment in EVA's is through 2 ways. One, the financial performance of increased sales over the last 3 years. As well, the social return of more youth being trained, bringing youth into the program, and connecting them with jobs. And the key, though, why it has been a success, what we've seen is that consistently, Eva's Phoenix Print Shop, their staff, the youth, everyone involved, have valued our partners' time and skills as much, if not more, than the actual financial dollars, which has been significant. And that's really the key to success in a venture philanthropy, in that the investors' time and skills are valued. Given this unique criteria, SVP's application process requires that we develop an in-depth understanding of the organization before we decide to invest in them. This process involves working with a short list of nonprofits to assess their organizational capacity areas and determine the areas of need and how SVP can help them. And as well, we're looking for 3 specific qualities in the organization: that they've prioritized strengthening their organizational capacity. So it's more than just about the need for more capacity. It's also that they're prepared to grow or deepen the impact of their programs and services, and they're committed to working with our partners. As I said, we're currently carrying this out with a short list of 6 not-for-profits, and our new investment chair is in the audience and can talk about that more afterwards, because I'm getting the sign to wrap up. Thank you for your time. I hope that you have a better than ever understanding of venture philanthropy, and that the key to success is the engagement of the investor's time and skills, as well as their financial investment. If you're interested in learning more about SVP, either as a partner or for an investment, Annette Hetherington, our brand new executive director, is here today, as well as several partners. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Julia Langer. I'm the Executive Director of the Toronto Atmospheric Fund. TAF is an arm's-length agency of the City of Toronto, which is mandated to advance solutions to climate change and air pollution. We've been around for 20 years and have an asset of $23 million, which we invest in a variety of ways in marketable securities, as many foundations do, but we also have up to 40% of our asset available for direct investment or impact investing in keeping with our mandate, which is really focused on climate change abatement. So as an investor, we actually are very lucky to have staff capacity. My colleague Tim Stote, some of you may have met through various sessions, is really actively out in the constituency looking for great deals. And these really are deals that will yield us a market rate of return because that's where we get our revenue from, and greenhouse gas emission reduction. So we're looking for that double bottom line. And I would say a third bottom line is really a market transformation so that others can actually do the kind of investing that we think is required to advance real solutions throughout society to this global problem. So when I think about best practices, really it's all about creative deals. And so there are investors like us, and increasingly a bigger number of investors with even more money than we do, who are looking for those really interesting deals that can give you the double bottom line. What do I mean about creative? Well, number one, long-term, visionary, does this deal, it might just be one deal that doesn't have a capacity to change things in the marketplace. Not only just, you know, the bits and pieces, but big change. And so those need to be articulated and thought through. I agree with this long-term thinking. It is an opportunity for whether it's a for-profit or a non-profit to really think, what are they going to do in this space? Be creative about structure. We've done some very interesting transactions where it wasn't obvious that this would really fly, that this would yield, that there was security, that because we have to operate under the Trustees Act, we need security. We have to be a prudent investor. Be creative about telling what the benefit is, not only market transformation, but in the case of social ventures and environmental ventures, concretely, what are you going to do for the planet? And not just sort of a vague, it's going to save energy, but really nail it down. And be creative about the negotiation process, because we're different kinds of lenders. So it's not really just about whose advantage is here, but what are we going to get out of this deal. So I won't go into all sorts of examples of what we think are great deals, but we have about $3.5 million committed, and some projects that are just waiting for, you know, nailing down some of the details, and that's in our portfolio of up to $9 million. These deals are out there, and we actually have to go get them. I'd say just a quick word on another best practice, which I think is emerging and we're gaining experience with, which is open source. We've run a competition called Climate Spark to find business ventures that as a way of finding deal flow. But the engagement with other borrowers and other people who are seeking capital is actually, you have to let go a bit of your sort of, IP perspective and actually engage with others, but you can learn a lot. And just quickly on the failures, I would say from our perspective, and maybe others have this experience, sometimes you see things that come to you as grants. We provide grants as well. They should be loans. Sometimes you see things that are loans and you think, oh, we'll forgive the interest or do low interest. No, they should be grants because, when you have forgivable loans on your books, it's really bad for the auditors. So, so really it's a practicality, but also in a perspective of how we can change the market. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ruth Richardson, and I'm the founder and chair of a new organization called Small Change Fund. Small Change Fund is a new award-winning online charitable marketplace that facilitates investment in grassroots projects all across Canada. Or as one of our more corporately minded supporters said, we are a market maker in a distribution chain to get money and resources from King and Bay to fishermen in BC. So I come from the not-for-profit sector. It's always nice to have other people from other sectors that can help you try on new language. We're just over 1 year old. We're brand new. And so far, we've invested in 22 projects all across the country, from a school restoration project in Joe Haven on Baffin Island, to the development of a land use plan for the Peel watershed in the Yukon, to a First Nations Leadership Summit in Fort St. John, BC, to bursaries for at-risk youth to attend a social justice youth camp in Tatamagouche, Nova Scotia. We focus on projects in rural and remote regions of Canada with a heavy emphasis on Aboriginal communities. And through a network of 25 advisors that we have all across the country, we work in hard-to-reach places and source projects that most people would never have access to. So now that I've told you a little bit about Small Change Fund, I want to tell you about a best practice in social finance. And my best practice focuses on sort of risk in your social investment portfolio. This is a true story about one of our investors, and like Alex, I've changed some of the details, but anyway, it is a true story. This investor had what you could call a very safe and somewhat sterile social investment portfolio of causes that she supported. So a church, a food bank, a university, all fantastic causes. But she was interested in diversification, both in terms of the number of projects she was supporting and in terms of sort of the risk portfolio. So in other words, she wanted to fund more projects, she wanted to fund edgier projects, she wanted to fund projects further afield, but she didn't want too much exposure kind of all at once because this was new territory for her. So she approached Small Change Fund, and we directed her to a project in the interior of BC that was sourced by one of our advisors. This project was called Help Save Fish Lake from Acid Waste. It was led by a group of Aboriginal women who were opposing a proposed copper gold mine. The root of their opposition was the fact that this proposed mine would turn Fish Lake, a lake sacred to them, into a toxic dump. So all they needed was $5,000 to make a video to take to the Environmental Review Tribunal. Our investor decided to put $5,000 into this project, and this is where the story gets interesting. The video was made, it went to the Environmental Review Tribunal, and the federal government turned down the mine. Amazing, but true. So this is a best practice in terms of citizen action and environmental success, of course. But I think in terms of the social investor, it's also shows some best practices on a number of other levels. First of all, it speaks to risk interest. So there are creative ways to support riskier projects and to build them into your portfolio of causes or initiatives, and to mitigate your risk exposure by spreading that risk out across dozens of small-scale projects. Secondly, it talks to the power of microfinance. Small-scale investments at the local level are incredibly powerful. We need to work from the ground up, where issues are felt, where they're understood, and where solutions are being generated, and we need to support those solutions with seed capital. Small amounts of money that can catalyze change. And particularly if these amounts are smaller than $5,000, the risk is quite minimal. Your exposure is not that great. Thirdly, it speaks to the efficiency of direct giving. The projects on smallchangefund.org profile real people in real places doing real things. So an investor knows exactly where their money is going, who it's going to, and what it's going to do. There's a beautiful efficiency to the model that maximizes the dollars that reach the community. And the fourth and final point I'll make is the role of the broker. So people, individuals, corporations, foundations are starting to recognize the value in using a broker like Small Change Fund that can add value to the transaction by sourcing projects, monitoring the results, spreading the word, and reporting out on impact. So again, as one of our supporters said, we're a market maker that facilitates the flow of resources. So I just want to close with a quote from Tom Munick and Heather Ironwood, who argue in Towards a Model of Microphilanthropy that, quote, the transformational energy raised by the increased number of microphilanthropists is greater than the single gift, and the beneficial effects on a community may be even greater. They go on to talk about how small-scale giving has many advantages, including increased intimacy and feedback, discovery of other beneficial forms of transaction, and, of course, optimizing and managing risk. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Adam Spence. I am Manager of Special Projects, Social Innovation Generation at MaRS, and founder of the Social Venture Exchange. And I am a worst practice. So I'm just going to stand here for 5 minutes and not say anything. But I'd like to talk about or examine the trajectory of global microfinance and its failures and derive some lessons about social finance in Canada. We know microfinance is one of the leading subcategories of impact investing, or social finance as an asset class. It represents about $6.1 billion, or roughly half of all impact investing. I think it really offers us an opportunity or a window into our future of social finance. Let me start off by saying as well that microfinance, for both of you, is not a failure. It's not a failure as an industry globally or locally. It's raised people's incomes, eliminated poverty for many households, and helped people manage shocks. Grameen Bank has been able to flow through $10 billion as the disbursement rate of 97.3%, both houses and enterprises, and helped millions of people. But there have been many highly publicized failures and worst practices, from public offerings like SiG Microfinance, Banco Compartamentos in 2007, high interest rates, which have caused challenges for many families, and increased default rates have been caused by over-leveraging. Again, those high interest rates, repayment frequency, and aggressive lenders. There's been insufficient training, literacy, business planning training, weak regulation, and government involvement that has not been helpful. So the first item is there is a challenge of balancing mission, profitability, and scale. There's a drive for many to try to add advantage to profitability over the impact that we have. We know that large pools of capital have been attracted to microfinance around the world. The sector itself has expanded from 1.3 to 6 billion, or 5 times in the past 6 years alone. The growth has been absolutely tremendous. So many people have been looking for private equity attracted to this space, which has caused that overcharging or over-leveraging of clients. And that pursuit of market rate returns can drive high interest rates. In 2006, global microfinance interest rates averaged 26.1%, which is very high. We know that those particular microfinance institutions that are private, that have gone public in raising capital, have high interest rates. That Banco Compartamentos in Mexico has interest rates of 75 to 85%. SKS Microfinance has interest rates of 26 to 31%. These are very high. We know that Grameen Bank has interest rates which are much lower, 5, 8, or 20%, depending on the type. Government officials have obviously been involved in order to moderate and recognize that profit motive as being negative in some cases. We know that sustainability drives returns. You need to be sustainable in order to have capital. But there has to be a reasonableness of these expectations among investees. Similarly, here locally, we have to be reasonable with the expectations that investees can have amongst all the institutions we have in front of us. Another lesson as well, that we know it costs a lot in order to do our work. CAIC, or Access Community Capital Fund, it does require a lot of money in order to do that kind of work. So we require subsidization. Just as here in Canada, we're going to require subsidies in order to maintain the work of social finance moving forward. And in addition to that, also the training business advisory supports the lessen default rates, which would work through things like social innovation generation here at MaRS. There are tremendous risks as well with being involved in the capital markets. SKS Microfinance, as an example, dropped by 9% as a stock between July and October of 2010. And so what happens if that stock gets shorted? What happens to those loans for many people? And also there's the moral hazard of people that have made tremendous amount of money. $13 million was made by their CEO when he sold his shares. Finally, I would say, and not to continue on the downer, but microfinance is not the singular solution. Microfinance is not the means, just as social finance is not going to solve all of our problems. It's not the panacea solution. That we require public policy change, investments in basic infrastructure, roads, houses, hospitals, education, and that microfinance institutions, I think, just as globally they understand, social finance practitioners here understand that social finance is a part of a broader context. Just want to read one final quote. I hope I have 30 seconds left to do so. That was made by Grameen Unitas Action Opportunity Internationale. This is like is this the curtain that's closing on me, or? I guess it's going up, so I got tons of time. But I'll replace microfinance with the word social finance, just as my closing comment. The real impact of social finance lies in its ability to create inclusive financial systems and inclusive societies. Societies where the individual is not shut out of what that society has to offer. Social finance specifically allows households and enterprises to benefit from financial inclusion. We need to be reasonable and measured in terms of what social finance can accomplish. To thrive, social finance requires a host of favorable conditions, including regulatory environment, political stability, mission-driven practitioners, cost-effective delivery, capital adequacy, and most of all, clients ready and able to leverage its services. These are lessons that microfinance has learned globally, ones we need to learn locally as well. Thank you.
Well, it's very clear to me that all of our speakers are very seasoned risk managers because they've all successfully managed the reputational risk of being cut off by the merciless Peter here. So congratulations and thank you not just for sticking to time, but also for your incredible insights as we went from Adam Smith or Adam Smith's invisible presence in the room to Adam Spence at the end of the discussion. We have, I guess, about 20 minutes or so for questions, and we know that our speakers will have provoked many in all of you, so Peter and I are going to kind of direct traffic a little bit here. Please, there are microphones available, but we can probably just hear you, or you probably prefer. Our TV producer wants you to use the mic so it can be properly captured and recorded for posterity. So please approach the mic and direct your question to a particular speaker, or you can sort of throw it out there and we'll see who replies. Who'd like to kick us off? I think we have one here.
Hi, this is a question for all the presenters. I wanted to know if or anybody could answer it, let's say. Has anybody experimented with equity instead of lending money on interest as a profit share system, or is there any experience in that?
You want to handle that? Experimentation with taking equity in a venture?
Yeah. Well, Toronto Atmospheric Fund has certainly made transactions where the main return is on an interest basis, but we have negotiated some equity arrangement, and it really depends on a case-by-case basis, and you have to have the ability to administer that and plan that into your own long-term plan and business plan. So it really depends on the negotiation. As I say, that's the sort of part of the creativity of seeing what you can give and what you can get and what makes for a good deal.
I'm going to have, as God is my witness, a for-profit company one of these days.
Here's your chance to make your pitch.
Do the financing opportunities discussed here also apply to potential for-profit companies?
Sure, yes, they do. Thank you.
great. Who do I talk to? Which one?
So there are many people that deal with for-profit companies. Toronto Atmospheric Fund is one example. There are many impact investing funds actually across Canada. If you were to look at Investico, which has a number of private equity funds, they're a good example of that. CAIC Fund, CAIC, Canadian Alternative Investment Cooperative, also deals with for-profit companies. So if you'd like to become friends with them, they're friendly people. Beth and Julie are great, and through MaRS, we can also make those contacts for you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got another question coming up here.
Hi, my question's for Anshula, but if everybody else has experience, I'd be interested too, and that's about social metrics and quantifying them, because I think it's very easy. We've got a huge bunch of established measures for financial metrics, but it's a lot more difficult to say, well, you know, what is this social good, and how can, I guess, particularly you say that with X number of dollars, you've done more social good than someone else has with that same number of dollars.
So that's a pretty that gets into the method of social value and measuring it, but the brief answer is that you would start with looking at the social mission of an organization and looking specifically at what kind of social impact you're trying to create. And then you go through a process called financial proxies, where you're coming up with dollar amounts that you're saving the economy. So to take a really brief example, if you're educating people and putting them through university, for example, you would eventually say, like, if with a high school salary you'd make $20,000, and with a university salary you'd make $44,000. The value add of that is $24,000. So that's a very brief example, but what I would say about that is it's really important to clearly state that those are your assumptions and be able to, you know, elaborate on them and defend them in discussion.
Other questions? Over here, maybe we can just pass the mic over to him.
Sure. So I guess my question is about, I know the Center for Social Innovation talked about that Class C bond, which was $10,000, but I'm curious, even that's a little high end for like retail level investing. And I'm just wondering if anyone here has any experience with trying to do social finance at the retail level. I have a checking and savings account, transferring money into that kind of thing through a standard financial organization. And what would be the key barriers to trying to do social finance at a retail level?
Social finance of retail. I think Alex has a comment. And by the way, other speakers, feel free to jump in. We don't have to restrict it to just one comment.
I hope I can answer your question, but one of the things that Access does is we partner with financial institutions as a way of administering the loans. Because we're a nonprofit, we're not the bank that physically hands out the money and collects it. And as a result, so one of our financial partners right now is Alternative Savings. And for every loan that we distribute, the client actually walks into an Alternative Savings branch to not only set up their accounts and collect their loan, but it's at that point in time that they're introduced to other financial products and services that, you know, could be useful to them personally. For example, a checking account or a saving account. And because some of our clients are quite marginalized, they've been financially excluded all their lives, this is a tremendous opportunity for them to re-engage in the commercial or retail banking side. So,
I'm thinking more on the side of investors who want to put in social finance.
Okay.
So with social venture partners, it's all about the individuals, like Dan and myself and other partners in the room, including our ED, have personally contributed a very manageable amount. And then that's pooled, that $75,000 that was invested in EVAs. I just had one little part of it, as did Dan, as did other people in the room. And so that makes it very accessible to be part of something much bigger than we ever could do on our own.
One more from Jessica.
From the standpoint of the social enterprise or the nonprofit that's providing the investment offer, the reason why it was $10,000, at first we started at $5,000. We needed to be practical and realistic with our business case to be able to return the investment. So we realized that really $10,000 was the lowest we could go to still make it a profitable enterprise to offer this investment. However, there have been a couple of cases where there have been families. One of my favorite story was a 17-year-old daughter who had $2,000 and her brother, and she went to her dad and she said, "Dad, you should be socially investing, and you got to check this out." She'd read about it in the paper, and so she and her brother together put their savings toward that $10,000. So if you don't have $10,000, but you believe in it, you could, through some sort of trust agreement with friends or family, create that $10,000 package.
Comment from Adam over here.
That's right. There really are, to my knowledge, no mainstream impact investing products for retail clients. There is, if you look at Calvert Community Investment Notes in the States, which I think has a minimum of $1,000 and the variable interest rate of, I think, 0.5 to about 2%, you can, as an Ontario-based investor, place capital in that kind of investment. But the challenge is obviously the regulatory environment within which we operate, that in order to construct the kind of offering that would be able to attract retail investors costs a lot of money and is vastly complicated. And because the sector itself is quite small, I mean, impact investing in Canada is about $2 billion, and the lion's share of that is in funds and affordable housing. There really isn't that opening yet for retail investors, but I think it's something that, from our perspective at SVX, is something we're trying to push towards in the next 3 to 5 years, to see people being able to invest in local ventures in a better way.
We can take a couple more questions. Anybody else? I'll throw one out there for the panel. I wonder if you could share something. You heard 8 of your colleagues speak today. What's the one thing you heard from a colleague that you learned that was something different or something that intrigued you, an approach or a perspective? Julia.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting, Beth, was your point that debt is a good fundraiser. And to, you know, we deal mostly with for-profit organizations, so that's where most of our lending goes to, but we do also lend to institutions. And just framing up a business plan and a business case and you know, then a repayment structure that engages the community. Maybe you can do, you know, maybe you can then go into community bonds to do it. So, you know, and I think that's when you can engage the investor and the investee and sort of make it bigger than the sum of the whole. So I thought that was quite interesting concept.
Terrific. Other comments or perspectives over here?
Yeah.
From Ruth?
I have 2 things, actually. One was around measurements. Because we're so new, we're just getting into thinking about evaluation and measurement. So I'd love to follow up and learn more about that and sort of feed that into our thinking at Small Change Fund. The other thing was what Joanne said about time and skills. And it's interesting because SVP has a fairly close-knit kind of face-to-face community. Small Change Fund, of course, has a very dispersed community because we have investors from all across the country. So it just got my wheels turning, thinking, how can we use the time and skills of people that may be up in the Yukon or maybe in northern Saskatchewan or, you know, anyway, so just trying to think about that. But, you know, given that we have folks all across Canada. So anyway, 2 really good bits of food for thought for me.
That's great. Quick editorial comment. I mean, one thing that we benefit from at Social Venture Partners is that we're part of an international network, because there are actually SVP chapters in 25 cities across North America as well as Tokyo, and so we often benefit from collaboration across the SVP network. So that's often a great source of knowledge for us as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Other perspectives? One over there. Adam? No, you're closest to the mic.
Sure. I'd just like to make a comment. I'm the only man up here. I think that's amazing. But if you, I just looked across, and I think that this is a sector, social finance, which is being driven by women who are leaders, which I think is wonderful. And so, and again, that's probably why I was last, because I have the least amount to say. But there is a tremendous amount of skill and experience and passion for this work, which is awesome. And that's, I think, what gets everyone here up at the end of the day, but also brings so many people out to this room, because we were oversold. So that's my feedback.
That's great. And don't worry, Adam, neither Peter nor I shifted nervously when you talked about that. So we have a question from a guest over here. So.
Hi. One of the resonant themes that I'd heard when you were talking about both best and worst practices was about successfully engaging different people from different contexts and backgrounds. You've got nonprofits, you've got experts from different areas, you've got economists, you've got investors, and so forth. And it sounds like the successes really come from really bridging that gap between the different worlds and getting them to understand each other, like the need for profit on the one side, the need for social purpose or to meet a social purpose on the other side, and all the stakeholders' needs in between. So one of my questions to you, though, or my question to you is, having, covered a lot of ground in this area, but recognizing that the term social innovation and social enterprise is still not part of the common public discourse, where do you see the next frontier? Like, where is it an industry? Is it a particular demographic? Is it a group? What are, like, and this may vary from, one panelist to the next, but what's the next frontier that you're looking at in terms of creating new relationships and expanding the scope of social innovation and social enterprise?
All right. How do we create new relationships, understanding, awareness? What's the next frontier? Anne's going to tackle that small question.
Yeah, I don't have I'm not the kind of big picture thinker, so I'm focused on the Pan Am Games, which is my next frontier. They're coming to Toronto in 2015. I would like to ensure that there's as much social value that comes out of the billions that are going to be spent on the Pan Am Games in Toronto and in, I think there's 16 municipalities that are involved. So I'd like to see that a social benefit come to us, or come to our sector as a result of that. So not huge thinking, but just one of the next steps in terms of where I'm thinking. And I'm working with Allison on that.
Holy segue, Batman. My name is Allison Hewitt. I'm the Director of Social Innovation here at MaRS. I am the big picture thinker. I can't actually do anything, but I think really well. So what I see happening is we're looking to create a center for impact investing. And so when you look at some of the stuff that's been happening, Monitor does really interesting things, like they look at when social finance starts up in communities, there's sort of disparate little things that happen all over the place, and then you've got to begin to catalyze that so people have a way into this and begin to find language that works for them. And so we're really excited about transitioning over the course of the next year to create a permanent home for places like the Social Venture Exchange or SocialFinance.ca, and to engage a community of impact investors so that they can grow and figure out what the deal flow is, so we'll support the actual social venture. So it's working at a variety of different levels, catalyzing it around a center, and then going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that one of the things you posed in your question was around sort of populations. And one of the things that we're really thinking about is sort of the younger cohort. So how do we start to engage and connect with young adults, and even below that, children, and get them to think about themselves as investors and as philanthropists. So we've had a couple of interesting examples. We've had a little after-school program that for Water Week, they all pooled their money and they got $50 together and they invested in one of our water projects, which was fantastic. These are all little kids that are, 5, 6, 7 years old. The other fantastic example, because it really was not instigated by us at all, was a young guy named Ben who lives in Hamilton, and he was having his bar mitzvah, and he decided instead of accepting gifts, he was going to choose one of our projects and direct everybody to that project. So I think that's a real area of growth for us and possibly for others up here at the front and in the audience. So, yep.
Okay. Adam and then Julia.
Sure. To speak back to your question as well, I think the Canadian Task Force on Social Finance, which was led by Ilse Chernik, the CEO here at MaRS, it was framed within a context of three things you need to do. You need to build research and policy to get government interested in activating the agenda. You need to be able to mobilize new capital through the right kinds of infrastructure and means of connecting people. And then you need to build the pipeline of investment with the right kinds of advisory supports, regulations, laws, et cetera, that actually provide an impact investing system system or social finance framework that's going to allow us all to succeed. And that's, again, these people up here. You have funds, you have people that are doing measurement, people doing philanthropy, and frontline organizations that are going out and issuing capital. So that's how we'd see it.
Okay. And I think Julia had a comment on this. Yeah.
Well, I think it does have to be from the vision and your objective. And so Toronto Atmospheric Fund's objective in this area is to leverage 10 times the amount of capital that we manage, to influence that. So we have 23 million, it's a small pot, but we need way more money invested in solutions to climate change, and in particular on efficiency. So we see that as the frontier is the biggest, cheapest, fastest way to get emission reduction. And you know what? It's NPV positive, so it's a great deal. So that really becomes a framing for where we're going to lend, where we want others to lend with us or on their own, and where we see the need for really great deals coming forward. And it is matching up that pipeline of deals and the money, which is when we're going to get something beautiful happen. So I think that's that's our thing. Other people have other things, and then we will have really great examples of how this social finance works. Mm.
Thank you for just a tremendous question that sparked a lot of interest. And I think one thing that I've noticed in attending the International Social Venture Partners conferences over the years too is just how much more of a role advocacy seems to be playing in what we do. So it's not just investment and education, but we're thinking more and more about how we can build relationships with decision makers at the various orders of government. So anyway, great question. We have time for one more question. Who would like to have the distinguished honor of posing it? All right. Right there.
Hi. I understand the Canadian, the banking sector, they operated pretty good and also pretty much socialized. What's the difference? You guys do the social finance and versus the banking, the provided service for the social goods and all kinds of service. Why the people come to you guys instead of go to the bank directly to get the funding, right? Get a service. It's just nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
So why do they come to you as funders as opposed to going to a bank? I think Beth is going to jump in here.
I think the main reason is that our idea of return is different than the banks. Yes, we have to keep the capital. I know CAIC, that's always keep the capital, preserve the capital. That's always job one, and that's the same as a bank. So there you have it, no different. However, when it comes to what we look at as return, we have a social return and a financial return coming up to our whole return. I'm not sure of any bank metrics that allow to have the social return as part of your whole return. So really, this is a sphere where people see a blended return of the actual physical money coming back and the social return for a total return. And problems in measuring it, absolutely. You're starting it's not an easy thing to do, but it's investors, and I guess this harkens back to the other question about how big is this sector ever going to be. It's going to be as big as we can get folks to see that the social return is something that's for them. And that's still, I think in this whole sector personally, still a big question about how big that's going to be. Is that sort of answered? Any other?
And I think that if I turn the lens on that, I can take your question and say, why do people invest in the CSI community bond as opposed to any other investment or mutual fund out there that may have almost as good a return and perhaps as good risk management behind it? And it's because it is a socially responsible investment. And that is why we are different. And that is what this entire panel represents, is socially responsible investing. And with a lot of transparency that when you go to your bank, you really don't know exactly where your investment is going, or when you borrow money from the bank, you're not exactly sure about all the machinations behind it. So to what Beth is saying is, how big is this social finance going to be? I think that socially responsible investing is going to grow exponentially, and it's going to be, I think that is the new frontier actually for us and for young people in Canada.
Thank you. All right, we're going to squeeze one more question in, and it's right here.
Yes, thank you for the time, and I appreciate all the experts here sharing their insights and experience. I wanted to know how each of the organizations represented here see their activities in relationship with CSR, and what's new about social finance and social innovation that we were not achieving with the CSR discourse, and what the for-profit businesses were doing becoming socially minded. Thank you.
So how social finance connects to corporate social responsibility, how it's different. Joanne.
So I think many of we grant to not-for-profit, so it's a little bit different than to businesses. And in terms of CSR, of course, corporations give to the charitable sector quite well. But almost all of the funding is going to programs and services, and so for not-for-profits to be able to reinvest in their organization and become stronger, that funding is really limited from their perspective. And also, I think the individuals who become partners, many of them who work within the corporate sector as well as other sectors, they come and join with us because they're looking for an opportunity to engage on an individual basis. The skills that they're using during the day to make the world a better place in terms of economically, they're really not able to make it a better place socially, and so that gives them an opportunity that I think the CSR, as positive as it is, isn't really offering individuals right now.
Just quickly, I would point you to the recent Harvard Business Review, an article by Michael Porter about new capitalism and how CSR is, the first, along a spectrum of real social responsibility and building value within our society. It's something that corporations must do. They should be socially responsible, but that does not necessarily mean building constituency and community, investing in their community. So it's not, there's no mutually exclusive, it's just really a spectrum, and I think the organizations represented in social finance is really a piece of the investing in community and investing in social value, and maybe corporations could step up a little bit more and do more of that.
Right. Yeah, no, great point. Great point.
Allison's going to add just a piece.
Thank you. So this is something I think about a lot. So CSR traditionally have a corporation and they'd write a check because someone came to them for a fundraising point of view. And then they got smart and they made it more strategic. So they began to align with their particular whatever the product they're selling. If it's got something to do with houses, they would give to a homeless shelter or something like that. And then what we see our job as is really, really pushing that boundary so you get to the point that Julie was talking about creating shared value. So for me, this is actually not about socially responsible investing. I think that's already been done. That's a negative screening kind of option, and we are way beyond negative screening. We're about creating a blended value proposition. And so I would really encourage you all to absolutely read that article that Julia mentioned. It's the January-February edition of the Harvard Business Review. Actually, Tanya wrote a really great blog on it. You can get that on the CSI site as well. But it's really about thinking completely differently about the role of corporations, not simply as writing checks, not simply about making it strategic, but actually living and breathing a blended value proposition that will create a world that's about making money and making a difference.
Great point to end on. Thank you very much. And I think the good news from the perspective of so many people here is that we're beginning to see this change. And I congratulate all of you for being at the forefront of this change, whether it's in the actions you're taking by being investors or by seeking investments, or even by being here today and seeking to educate yourselves. So for us, it's been a joy to co-host this event on behalf of Social Venture Partners Toronto. If you want to find out more about us, svptoronto.org. You can also follow us on Twitter, which is another terrific avenue where so many folks in the sector are engaging in a really powerful way. So thanks from me, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter for the last word.
Great. I want to make a special thanks to all the speakers who took time out of their day and accepted the fact they had just 5 minutes, for the most part. We've had a lot of fun. This is an exciting space to be working in. Personally, I feel privileged to be able to do that here with all of you in the room. I'd encourage you to check out the social entrepreneurship section of the MaRS website. Check out Social Venture Exchange, SocialFinance.ca, Social Venture Partners, and we will link on SocialFinance.ca to each and every one of the speakers who had something to say today. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you at the next event.